Welcome to Top Shelf, where we seek truth,
opinion,
perspective,
and we seek solutions.
We are back. Podcast number 3.
Oh, Grace.
1 was down.
Wow.
2 was awesome. 3, we going up some more. But we always want to start off with a question. Something I was just thinking about just for the whole week. I wanted to know, I've been really having. I want to be transparent on this. I've been having real good conversation with my pastor.
Here we go.
And we usually been talking about faith. We just been talking about the church. We've been talking about marriage. I really do believe that when you're married, you should have a community. And one thing I've learned as men, sometimes we're not vulnerable with our people around us. Do you guys have a relationship with your pastor?
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to Pastor Maurice. Team Winners Church. We in the building always.
They don't sponsor us, by the way.
Anthony, to answer your question, Team Saints. You can't win if you're not a saint. My shout out to my pastor, Pastor Chris Durso, who leads Saints Church. He's amazing. He's great. Love his family. Praying for you, Pastor Chris, if you hear this.
Definitely, I'll bring it all together. Life Church, Pastor Ernst. I think over the period of time, and when you are listening to this, it was a rocky road because I didn't really trust my pastor. And the only reason why is because of trauma from church hurt, but also not understanding how to build relationship in regards to a pastor. Because you're always thinking when you're in a church environment that the pastor's over there, you're the congregation, so you're way over there. So you don't really have a conversation with the pastor, big or small.
True.
So my question to myself really is, what is the responsibility of the church? Yikes. The people in the back, prepare yourself, put your seatbelt on. We're about to go for a ride.
Here we go.
Listen.
Make sure you have your seatbelts on. If we got to look at the history of the Black church, right?
Okay.
So the history was the church was the foundation of the civil rights movement. The church was there to protest against racism.
Okay.
If we look at it, it was a pillar of the Black community.
Okay.
It was there for us in our times of hurt, need, protest.
Love it.
And so on and so forth. That's what I would say in terms of your question.
Okay.
No, I agree with Fred. I mean, we look at the history of the church, especially in the Black community. It was where we can go, obviously, to get the word of God. But it was also a place of healing. It was a place of counseling. With everything that's going on in the Black community. We looked at church as every Sunday or whatever day that you would go to. But traditionally on Sundays, for most churches, is that this is a place where we could have real conversations. And
are we having real conversations in the church? Or
depends on the church. Depends on the church.
Okay.
Depending on the church. But, just with the Black community, with the Black church, Pentecostal Baptist church, this is where it's
or non-denomination.
Or non-denomination, where you can go there and talk about what's going on in the Black community.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you're getting the word of God, but you're getting the conversations where it's like, okay, go out and vote.
Right.
Go out and vote. What can we do to better our community?
Right.
Outreach to our community. These are things that obviously sometimes doesn't get talked about, but that church has been around for 30, 40 years, staple in the Black community.
Absolutely.
Those are conversations that you have so you could be vulnerable and be yourself, in a way, but you could kind of trust in your pastor. I think there's a special relationship that Black churches have with their pastor, especially when it comes to social issues, when it comes to economic issues or just things, because your pastor tends to be part of the community for the most part.
Okay. Now, what I'm keep on talking about responsibility,
Yeah.
but I really want to hear your perspective
Mhm.
because I need to understand because I really trying to understand in my walk and my journey
Mm-hmm.
that somebody that's more aware of life.
Mm-hmm.
What is the responsibility of the pastor? Is his responsibility just for his congregation?
Mhm.
Is his responsibility for the social justice
Mhm.
around his congregation? Is his responsibility for the economic of his congregation,
Mhm.
if they're poor or rich? Is he or she, in regards to pastor, is it their responsibility for the congregation? Because
Mhm.
I've gone through life and I finally met a church or I
Mhm.
finally went to a church that I can see,
Mhm.
okay, this church is different
Mhm.
because this church will teach me about relationship. This church will teach me about life groups. This church will teach me about being one with self in regard to self-awareness.
Yeah.
This church, I met my wife through this church.
Mhm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but also this church is also having conversation, political conversation.
Right.
But this church hasn't had a conversation,
Yeah.
and there's no shade to this church
Right.
about finance.
Mm.
Yes, we have these life groups, and it's amazing. But should the church or the pastor be responsible for the finance of his congregation?
I think so. I mean, we look at the Bible, look at Jesus for an example. Jesus was for the people, right?
Mhm.
So Jesus ministered to the poor. He ministered to those who were without. He ministered to those who were handicapped. Jesus was for the people,
Mhm.
you know? So when we look at our pastor, and obviously our pastor is not, we don't look at our pastor as Jesus,
Correct.
but he is speaking on the behalf of Jesus. He's speaking on the
Correct.
behalf
Mhm.
of God,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So as a pastor, in my personal opinion, in my perspective, yes, you know, we could read the scriptures all day and he could be preaching, but it's different between preaching and teaching, right? And if he's
Ooh.
teaching, he's
Mhm.
also going to be teaching about life,
Mhm.
relationships, finances,
Absolutely.
social injustice issues, because this is what affects your church. This is what affects your church
Mm.
community. So
Right.
it is the pastor's responsibility to not only preach and teach, but also to mentor
Right.
his church.
Right. And I was gonna say to Jeff's point, what you were saying, who is the pastor responsible for? He's responsible for his flock, for the people he is responsible to shepherd them, the people that come into the church. Because the Bible says that the pastor himself has to take an account for that when he gets to heaven, you know? And so he's responsible for all. Like, I love the point you said about preaching and teaching, because it's like there's definitely a distinct difference. If they're preaching, you could say that's toward the spiritual, and when they're teaching, you can say that's toward the practical, you
Mhm.
know, in a basis, because that's what you have, like Bible study. We have Bible study too, so that we can get deeper into our word, you know. And you have those times where, you know, those financial seminars, our churches might offer like financial literacy, you know, or they might offer like relationship counseling, uh, which a lot of churches do. A lot of like my wife's church, which is your church, Anthony, offered us counseling premarital, which
Mhm.
benefited us a whole lot right now in our marriage. So it's like the church exists for those outside it, essentially, but the pastor exists for those inside it.
Mm.
You
So
know?
I love
what if
that.
what if I'm a pastor
Mhm.
and I lived on the Mark 16:15
Mhm.
and it says that just basically preach the gospel
Mhm.
to all your creation.
Mhm.
And that is it.
Right.
You don't got to worry about social justice. You don't got to worry about anything else, but just preach the gospel.
Yeah.
Mark 16. What about that? What if I'm a pastor that says I don't really want to worry about the social justice of my congregation.
Mhm.
That's not my forte.
Mhm.
I don't have the language for it.
Mhm.
I don't even really know how to talk about it. So I just want to preach the gospel. I just want to bring people to Christ, and that is it.
I think.
And don't condemn me
Mhm.
if that's what I want to do for
Right.
my congregation.
Right.
then that church is not for you then.
Yeah.
If that's what you're looking for,
Okay.
then that church is not for you.
So now we're talking about individuality.
Right.
In regards to if I go to the church.
Yeah.
Because with last podcast, we talked about company.
Mm-hmm.
The church is also considered a company.
Yeah.
It should be an
Essentially.
LLC. It is taxed. It is given. People are given 10%.
Mhm.
So in that conversation,
Mhm.
if I'm an individual that's given my 10%, should I not know, or should you not be responsible for what I'm going through as a congregation, as an individual?
Mm.
Because if I'm going to, like, say, for example,
Right.
if I'm going to the Harvard Club,
Right.
or if I'm going to the Gentleman's Factory, I know I'm going to get
Mhm.
information.
Right.
I know I'm going to get access.
Right.
I know I'm going to get knowledge.
Yeah.
So if I'm given
Yeah.
my 10%,
Uh-huh.
and yes, it's to the kingdom,
Mhm.
but in the same perspective,
Mhm.
as an individual, if you notice in regards to our conversation, what perspective, truth, and opinions
Mhm.
does a pastor hold in regards to his congregation? That's family, individuality, his single people, all those individuals. Because I made a choice to come into your
Right.
kingdom. I made a choice to come into your church.
Mhm.
I didn't have to make that choice, but I made that choice.
Mhm.
Right.
And now because you are preaching the good word, I said to myself, you know what? I think I like this church. Now, I think now happens to be 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. So a whole generation is now in this church.
Mm-hmm.
So we gotta talk about this now.
Right.
That responsibility in regards to the pastor.
Right.
What is his responsibility? He or she responsibility.
First, I want to go back to the point you said before that about if a pastor doesn't want to talk about those issues.
Yeah.
I feel like as though one way or another, you're going to talk about those issues.
What if I don't have to?
One way, like I said, the people are those issues.
Okay.
Because you can't be, not that you can be like a white pastor that's the head of a black church. You can. It's in New York. It's non-denominational churches. It's all these different denominations where that is most likely the case.
Okay.
It's mostly West Indian people, and then there's the pastor is white. It happens, point blank, period. But those issues you can't deny because it's gonna happen. It's gonna come into the lives of your congregation, and if you exist to help your congregation, then you can't deny that. Jesus didn't deny anybody. He didn't. His disciples did. Peter did. But Jesus didn't turn. He like, oh, I'm gonna turn away from you. You know, even when he knew Judas was gonna betray him, he didn't turn away from him. You know, it's one of those things that the more you run away from it, the more it's gonna catch up to you.
Yeah.
You know, so you can't say like, oh no, we don't talk about that here. Sooner or later,
Have to
going
talk
to
about it.
happen, and you're going to have to talk about it. Point blank, period. And the question you were asking about, like the responsibility about the person being a part of a church, right, for all of those years, and do
Whole
they,
generation.
yeah, multi-generation. I feel, point blank, period. I grew up in a Pentecostal church in the Midwest. For some odd years, I did not know anything about where the money was going. And I always had that thought in the back of my mind. Always. Like, we giving all of this money. I see all this money in these buckets and all these piles. And I'm not, to our listeners, I'm not coming against any churches about money. This is a literal conversation, an open forum. So,
And if I could just add on what Fred is saying, is like, it's also a conversation
right,
to bring to your pastor or bring to your church members and being able to say, I have this different perspective.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about this?
And you should be able to have an open conversation about money because it's a part of life. Like a church, Jeff was saying, church is a business. You know what I'm saying? It's a nonprofit, but it's still, it runs like a business,
yes,
right? So in my mind, as a kid in this Christian faith, I was like, okay, where's this money going? And I would see the pastor with the car and the and the suits and the jewelry and all these different things. And I'm thinking to myself, is the money going there? Because nobody's explaining this to me.
Mhm.
Nobody. It's just like, oh, you got to have God and have faith, but we're struggling as a family in a lower middle class.
Mhm.
Sometimes even the lower middle class. Like, why is our lights out, but we're going to a church with light? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we effectively be ministry and we don't have the basic necessities? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I was trying to understand that as a kid, you know, and people respond to me, have faith. You know, it was hard for my mind to place that. But I'm not putting blame on the church, Anthony. I want to say that point blank, period. I just wanted to know my understanding of money and faith was like misconstrued at that age until I had a pastor that came along and he broke it down. He literally went through all the funds, everything that came in, all the ties. We had a new, like with the changing of leadership. Pastor came in and he was like, listen, I'm adamant about this. My household is in order because I talk to my family about financial, you know, and this household will not be able to stand if we don't talk about this because we know people have questions.
Wow.
Point blank, period. And that at that point changed my whole mindset about faith and money that time.
Did it bring you closer to God?
I can say it did because like when you're a kid and this is like a whole nother conversation, when you're told stay in a child's place and you're told, hey, don't worry about that. You just show up to church. Don't worry about that. Just show up. And I'm like, but I just want to know because, you know, my mind is racing and I'm trying to figure out why.
You just wanted to have the knowledge.
Correct.
It's not that I'm saying to you as a body or a church, but I just want to have the knowledge in regards to that 10%.
Because the fact of the matter is that some churches don't pour back into their communities.
Facts.
And that's the point blank period. Like, we got to be honest. Like, churches pour into the church. They pour into the people who serve at the church. And they think that they're pouring in spiritually, but that thing goes, it's a revolving door. It keeps going both ways, like different way, like, you know.
And this what happens when churches looked as a business. Because, you know, you got to have pastors was like, yo, I got to be compensated. I got to maintain a lifestyle. I need to pay my mortgage, drive the car, or whatever. It's still in some shape or form, no matter how you look at it, as it is a business. Money's coming in. People are getting paid. Pastor, you know, maybe certain ministries as far as like, you know, things that people are getting paid, right? So it's a business. It's transactional, right? It is transactional in a lot of ways. But I love how Fred pointed out that he was inquiring, like, where is this money going? I grew up Catholic, right? So
really,
I grew up Catholic.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't either, you know?
Yes. Find out something new every day. So I grew up Catholic and I transitioned to going, you know, becoming a Christian and going to a Christian church in my late 20s, right? About 29 years old, right? You know, I just wasn't getting what I felt that spiritually that I needed from the Catholic Church, right? And so I started going to this Christian church. It was an amazing church down in Florida, right? And what was happening is that, like, it was a mega church, mega church. So, you know, with mega churches, it's kind of hard to build a relationship with your pastor, right? Because you're looking at a congregation of like thousands and thousands of people. So
good point.
He or she is not going to know every single church member. It's impossible, right? You're talking about a church that was like, they had 6-7 different services, Sunday, Saturday, and one during the week, just to accommodate its members, right? But one thing what that church did was, like, the pastor would always discuss finances. Like, okay, you know, he never forced people to tithe. He wasn't big on telling people you got to tithe 10%. That wasn't his thing. He was like, you know, I want people to give willingly, right? And so people would do that. But when it came to making financial decisions, he always brought it to the church, right? He always brought it to the church like, listen, we're building a new building. It's going to cost this amount of money, yada, yada, yada. As a church family, don't worry about the finances. trusting God in this. Give what you can give
Mm.
Have
if you
faith.
can.
Love it.
Have faith, basically. That's how that church operated. Fast forward, I moved back up here to New York. I started going to a different church, obviously, right? And this was a much smaller church. This is a church where it's much easier to build a relationship with your pastor. Pastor get a chance to know who you are essentially. But one thing what this church did was that same thing. They discussed finances. They moved to a new church building. It's like, okay, our mortgage is a little bit more. So, money's going to this. This needs to be fixed, kind of those things. You know where the kind of money was going, right? So when you're tithing, you're like, okay, I know where my dollars is going to. Not just I'm tithing or I'm giving, but what's going on with the money? Like what's happening with it? And he left an open door to if anybody had any questions regarding the finances that's being poured into the church, you could come see me. And I have no problem breaking things down and everything like that. They were very great at doing that. Winners Church, shout out to Team Winners. Same thing. I have a very close relationship with my pastor. And we talk about it because he's big on tithing. But he's big on tithing not so much because like I need all this money. He doesn't worry about money. It's really more so that if God has blessed me, I'm going to bless the church. The church is going to be able to bless the community. So if there is somebody who's in a financial struggle, and I've seen my pastor do this time and time again, okay, this person in financial struggle, no problem, boom. Or he'll randomly send me a text, and not only me, other people. God is telling me to bless you with lunch. He's telling me to bless you with dinner. Let me know what you want to eat. I'm going to Uber Eats it to you. I'm going to send it. Before the pandemic, when we used to actually have physical church service, right now church is on it's visual, right? Because
Virtual.
Yeah, virtual rather. Sorry, thank you. Virtual. We haven't actually met back up as a church physically. But before then, right after church service, and we are a smaller church, about 70 to 80 members, we would always go out to eat afterwards, right?
The whole
And
church?
whoever's willing to come.
Okay.
Whoever's willing to come. Normally it's about 20 people. Usually not 70 people. But usually on average 15 to 20 people.
Mhm.
And he would pay for it.
Excuse me?
He would pay for it.
Okay.
And we're not talking about McDonald's. We ain't talking about Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
We'll go to Cheesecake Factory, Thai restaurants, all these different places. Yeah. And I've seen him pull out his card and he will pay for it.
Mm.
That's the type of, but his thing was, yes, I tell people to tithe because he is big on that. But I'm telling people to tithe is because with people tithing, it gives me the ability to also bless the church community, and do whatever that is needed that God requires me to do, because we need finances to make things move. We are doing, like I said, we're not meeting physically. So in order to able to have things stream on Facebook and YouTube, we have to get a somebody to manage the camera and all these different things. It costs money.
Absolutely.
Because it is a business at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So if people are not tithing or giving, how are we going to be able to fund this? You know what I'm saying? So that's my personal experience when it has come to the financial aspect when it comes to church, and seeing that and being able to have that conversation with my pastor, like, okay, what's the deal? What's going on with tithing?
So going back to what's the deal? Now, what if, from the pastor perspective, if the individual only gives maybe $20 a month,
Mm-hmm.
can that person go to the pastor and say, what do you do with the money?
Yeah, should. What if you give $1, $20? Money's still money.
Okay.
You have that right, because
Oh, you said I have that right.
yes, in my personal, you have that right. If I'm
Okay.
giving somebody money,
Mm.
I have the right to ask you what are you doing with that money. Now, doesn't mean I'm going to. Me personally, when I give, I give. That's
So
me personally.
you're not going to ask.
Yeah, but
Wait, money.
but at the same time, I'm
Can
not
I get
gonna.
$1, please?
Got you. Got you, my G.
Right
You know what
after
I mean?
this.
I got you. But I think at the same time, you do have that right
Okay.
to ask that question. Like,
Interesting.
okay, what are you doing with that money?
Mm.
Because if I work hard, you know what I'm saying? So if I'm working hard, 40 hours a week or more, and I'm giving my 10% or maybe less than 10%, because maybe I don't have 10%. Maybe all I can give is that $20, that $10, that $5 or whatever. I'm still contributing. Maybe not to your standards or what some say biblically, 10%, but I should have some right to ask, like, hey,
Yeah.
where is this money going? Because not only my money, it's
Right.
everybody else's money that's going
in the pot.
It's going into the pot.
Right. And no, like there should never be a fear there ever. Cause I'm like, a pastor doesn't exist to install fear in people. Like,
So good.
even though I've seen like there's many televangelists, so to speak, that they prompt you to give, they want you to give, and without you don't know their church because, excuse me, you haven't been there physically. You just watch them, right? There
Wow.
before the pandemic. There's late night televangelists. They come on and they're on TV like, dial this number, you get a prayer cloth, you get these. And I'm not speaking against them. Again, to all our listeners, I'm not coming against anybody. I'm just saying, like, we can't really ask them about where everything is going. And they're getting money from different places. Like, hey, we can't call up and be like, hey, yeah, I want to donate. But yeah, first I want to know where this money, you can, but I don't know if you would get a clear answer. Like, I've never done it. So our listeners, like, if you have done it, please let us know, like, in some way, shape, or form, like if you've done that.
So here's some questions I have. And should or should not be responsible for. Should the church be responsible if, say, for example, you have to put a down payment on a house? Should the church be responsible for that?
No.
And I'm gonna say no too. I'm gonna say,
but I'm giving about, say, for example, I'm giving $20,000 a year. That's a down payment on the house. So I'm literally giving you a down payment on my house.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't get back some type of money.
But here's the thing: the Bible
and when
says,
I say get to the audience in the back, when I'm saying I'm not a giver, like if you take something, I want it back. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that if I give to the church, like for example, if I give to a Roth, I could be able to take out money.
Yeah.
And it's 6%. So say for example, I put 10,000. By the end of the year, it might be 12 or 14,000.
Yeah.
But I'm saying I could take something out of that and give back at the end of the year.
I understand it.
So now I'm asking you, can I ask the church that I'm giving money to that is someone that's giving my spiritual and also my financial advice for money?
But I'm going to say this too. A church is not a bank. You can't go to a church and be like, okay, I'm going to make a deposit and now I need my withdrawal, at the same time. But hear me out. At the same time, it's like we know, like a business, like Jeff was referring to, how a church operates. The word is clear when it says render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. So if we give God, and that was in terms of government, right?
Okay.
So, we can't go to the government and when we file taxes every year, we expect to get something back. Understandably so, but we can't go in the middle of the year like, hey, I need my income tax now. Like, yo, son, I need to pay for a house. And even still, we still only get a fraction of what we think we're going to get because of certain things that happen. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying God and government are synonymous or anything like
church
that.
And state.
Yeah, church and state. Like, which we've had conversations about. Church and state are not synonymous, but we do have to look at the history there, how the church did dictate in the past how our country was run. On our money, it says, in God we trust. Still, you know what I'm saying? Even still within that. But to answer your question finally, Anthony, like, I don't think that's justified to be able to act. That's not a good ask, because then what if you have, like, if Jeff asks, okay, I need a down payment. You get it from the church. Next person come, I need that down payment. Then you have,
should be able to.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, you have all these people that, what if you go to a smaller church where that you say, hey, I need that money back that I got. Like, there'd be no church. It would be canceled out because it takes money to run a church, to keep the lights on. So if I give $20,000 to Jeff and they give me $50,000 and the church is 100 people.
Yeah.
How the church ain't gonna exist anymore.
Yeah.
It's the lights are gonna get shut off. The water's gonna get shut off, and then we're like, why is the lights off? Your house, the loan you needed. So I'm not saying that the church only serves itself. No, it serves the people. It pours into the community, but we got to be stewards. All of us, we have to be stewards of what we have. The word specifically talks about us being stewards.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you?
No, I agree with Fred.
Good point, Fred.
Excellent point. I agree with Fred 100%. You know, churches, it's funny, I was literally about to say that church is not a bank. It's not, you know, bank of church, you know? You're not opening a checking account, a debit, checking account, a savings account. You get your little debit card,
Exactly.
you know, with the Christ symbol on there.
Though?
Yeah. What if the church was a bank?
Well, what if the church was a bank?
But see, this is where you're gonna run into the issues of possibly, in my opinion, where if a church was run like a bank, there's gonna be more regulations. Because someone has to, one, the government's gonna be more involved. Now it won't even be nonprofit.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be for profit. That's gonna have
Exactly.
to change.
Mm-hmm.
So now the church is gonna get taxed. You know, there's certain things that's going to have to change with the dynamic of
That's an excellent point.
the church.
Great
So if that's why, like, if for it to go that route, I see more of a negative than a positive, right? Because now the church won't even be able to manage its finances the way they want to.
Mm-hmm.
Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
So I love what Fred was mentioning, that we have to be in a lot of ways responsible for our own finances, right? Hear me out. So obviously, everybody's financial situation is different. You know, we have middle class, we have poor, we have upper middle class, we have wealth. If it's a small church, most of the time, and I could be wrong, but if it's a small church, I'm going to assume they're not banking on a lot of money coming in. Because you got to look at the, you know, when you do the simple math, you're looking, let's say it's like 70 people, right? Same people goes to this church. Let's say everybody contributes, let's say $50 that goes in to this church, right? You do the math, 5 times 7, that's what? 3,500, right? Somebody double check my math, right? I don't got to calculate.
3,500 for one person?
No, 35 as a whole. 70 people, $50.
Okay.
7 times 5, right? 3,500 or something like that. Somebody please double check the math.
350.
350. There you go. Okay, that comes in. You still got to factor, like you said, the mortgage for the church,
Correct.
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
Lights,
Correct.
water,
Right.
pastor, associate pastor. You know, there's things that has to be accounted for and has to be paid for. Again, it's like a business. It is a business,
Okay.
essentially. So if everybody's coming in like, hey, pastor, I'm buying a new house. I need down payment for this. I know I paid X amount. And there are people who every money that they give, listen, they writing it down, tallying it up. Because when it comes to tax season, you know, like, hey, I know I paid this, this, and this, and this. And there are some churches who provides receipts of what you pay for the year.
Right.
As far as the tithes.
For tax season.
So for tax season. So there are churches who did that does do that. But if everybody's kind of trying to pull in out of the church will be essentially bankrupt. It would not be a church because the church would not be able to withstand. You know what I'm saying? One of the things that my pastor always says is that when we're tithing to bless the church, to bless God, essentially. Not even the church, really God. God gave us this income. He gave us this job.
Right.
So we're giving back to him so he can continue to give back to us. If we're constantly taking fruit out of the tree, but we're not planting the seed, how can that tree grow?
So I see what's happening here in this conversation. So my perspective or my thought when I presented the conversation, I also wanted to add on a new layer. So what if I do ask you for the 20,000 and I say to you, Pastor, this will be a part of the investment portfolio of the church. So you have percentage of this house or condominium or a $20 million profit, but all you have to do is put in 20,000. What is the conversation now?
So the church
You're-
is
so the church-
basically investing
Correct.
into a property.
So it's a part of their portfolio.
But what is the benefit to the church?
So
Is
say for
what
example,
I'm asking.
great question.
Mhm.
So say for example, if someone sells that property, the church gets it might get $10 million. It might get $750. It depends on what the house is valued.
Yeah, the market.
But at the same time, they have some type of investment in this property. So it'll be a part of their portfolio.
But who owns the property?
The company.
So
the church is an investor. So it's not they're investors. So they have a portion of that property. So if it sells, the portion of that money goes towards the church. So all you're
does it
doing,
go to the church or does it go to the pastor? Who's that money going directly to?
Great question. It goes towards the church.
But how do you regulate that?
That's where you come in.
How do you regulate that?
There you go.
Because we look at investors.
That's a great.
The mind of people.
I think that's a great
spirit of the flesh.
Yes.
Money comes in, things starts to change.
Exactly.
You see how it goes.
Yeah.
So now you're talking about investment properties.
Yeah.
Right? Where you could rake in thousands, millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So should we not, as a church, should we not act as a business? Because we are. All I'm saying, I'm just putting in a different language, is investor. So we can invest in a property, we can invest in a land and saying, hey, say for example, someone is in hardship, we have those 5 houses over there, and you know what, you can go to that house over there. So the pastor now is not seeing it as give me, it's seeing it, okay, I see the long term of how this can be effective for the congregation.
Right. I was going to, the pastor Mace said more money, more problems. So, I just wanted to say that to add to Jeff's point, but BIGPOPPA, no info for the DEA.
I just wonder what church he went to.
Okay. No, I had to say that.
Church of Hard Knocks.
Like the Spirit led me. I want to say I went over, I got a chance and an opportunity to do a comedy show near the Virgin Islands, and there's a pastor there that he actually owned land there. And I believe that, if I can remember correctly, that some of his the people that attended his church, they stayed in those apartments that he owned the land for, and he wasn't originally from the islands. He's from Chicago.
Sounds like a businessman.
So yeah. So in terms of investing in real estate, you can go back and forth with it. I feel like if somebody properly prepares like the plan and they talk to the board about it and the board approves it along with the pastor, there's no problem with that. But we're not going to be like, okay, you want a house? You get a house. You know what I'm saying? And I understand if somebody has a situation where they're in dire straits, but usually certain churches have programs in place that place these people in their own like apartments, in their own shelter, or their own houses, or wherever. Like there's always programs in place, Yeah,
and I think we can have a lot of what if, or what if this or what if that. And I think for this conversation, and I really want people to think about like the perspective of where does this 10% go to? Or can I go to my pastor and ask, hey, where does this money go to? And not have anxiety, because even us having this conversation, I myself have an anxiety. Like, whoa, you not going to the pastor? Like, who you think you are? Like, you're not big and bad. You're not part of the congregation. You're not an associate pastor. You're not a part of the congregation. You're not part of this. You're not part of that. So all of that thought is coming to my head. So I'm asking myself now, because we pride ourselves on solutions. So what are the solutions that we as Christians or just a body of Christ and goes to different type of church, or that person that's listening that may go to another church, how do we have a conversation around money?
I think you should find a church or be at a church where they have those conversations. Typically when churches have like financial literacy or they have conversations about money, there's most likely to be an open door where you can ask questions. Like, okay, they'll usually kind of break down where money goes as far as tithing, right? If you're at a church where those conversations are not happening, or where you feel a lot of anxiety to ask your pastor that question, and there's a lot of pushback, you may want to question that church. My opinion, my personal opinion, not to, condemn or knock any other church out there. You operate the way you feel. But I feel like if you are pouring in financially, they should be able to at least like, hey, money that's coming into the church right now, we are looking to build another level in the church. We are working to, maybe buy a new church property, because some churches have multiple different churches, right? You basically just know where the money's coming from. But if that question is being pushed back, I would question it, because I feel like when you're pushing something back and you're not giving answers, you're hiding something.
I'll say, to add to what Jeff was saying, is that don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's where it predominantly starts, because a lot of people, when you talk about church, when you talk about money and faith, people kind of get nervous. They're like, oh, well, I don't know if I should ask. I don't know if I should say anything, because there's a fear there.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that fear stems from or where it generates, because maybe they feel like they're going to get reprimanded, or they're going to be able to, try to kick them out of the church or something like that. But, you should be able to, the same way that you have your relationship with God in freedom, you should have that freedom to talk to your brothers and sisters of Christ.
Correct.
Your pastor, this man who's leading you, and you're not leading you, but he's helping you and nurture your relationship with God. You should be open.
Even if it's not the pastor, because maybe you can't go, maybe it's a mega church, and you should be able to go to the board and say, hey, where does this money go into? And I think we have the think about it. We have the questions. And I think for me is be honest. And if you feel that sense of like, whoa, I've been at this church for a long time and I don't really see anything going on, but I'm giving my money every month. So I think I should be asking some questions.
Never be afraid to ask questions at church. Like if your church instills fear, that is not the church for you.
That's not.
There's no fear in love, right?
Ooh.
So when you're at church, you're learning about the gospel.
Love.
Learn about God. God is love, right?
Yeah.
So it should be an open door policy. You should be able to have conversations and ask questions. It may not be directly at the pastor, because obviously if it's a mega church, like what you were saying, you're not going to be able to have that type of relationship with your pastor. It's just difficult. But it should be a board or somebody that you could like, hey, who can I talk to regarding what's going on with this church? What's the future of this church? Where the money is going? Things like that. And it should be able to at least direct you or answer those questions. You should be able to get some form of information. There are some churches where they post on their website. Like, hey, this is what's going on.
They post on the website?
Yeah, some churches like that. You know what I'm saying? So like I said,
like,
to
what
me,
does this church believe? Like,
what did it believe? Because at the end of the day, like if you're afraid to get kicked out of the church, then maybe that's not the church for you. There are other churches out there. You may get kicked out of church for asking those questions, but you're not getting kicked out of God's kingdom.
And Jeff, I wanted to add to that. I just wanted to say that, like, you may not get a return, Anthony, in payments, but from the church, you should get a return in presence. Woo! They should always show up for you, no matter what. Like, if you're in a hospital and like you spent like 20 years of your life at this church and nobody from the church, and they know, they should not put you on a list and be like, oh yeah, he's just on that list and we just praying for him. No, you show up.
Show up.
Correct.
That's it. We got to do a part 2, Anthony.
I think we got to do
this is too much.
I'm
really think we got to do a part 2.
Man.
And I think part 2, because I really want to get pastor's perspective.
Oh, we need to.
We just going to the church. I want to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
They run the church. So, it's all about our true
opinion
and our perspective.
So please, I just want to say we just are giving our thoughts. So let's have a conversation. Let's build together. But always remember, self-care is the best care. Peace.